They thought they were just boarding a flight to celebrate their anniversary until a stranger's cruel words tore them apart. But moments later, the whole cabin froze when the pilot stepped out and called them something that no one could have imagined. If you believe in justice and love, hit that subscribe button because this story will give you chills. It was a brisk autumn morning in Atlanta, the kind where your breath fogs the air and the airport's glass walls glimmer in the early sunlight. Malcolm and Denise Carter had been married for 3 decades, and today they were finally taking the trip they'd dreamed of for years, an anniversary getaway to London. They walked through the terminal hand in hand, the smell of fresh coffee from a nearby kiosk mingling with the faint tang of jet fuel in the air. Everything felt perfect until they reached the gate for Flight 278. The gate agent smiled politely as she scanned their tickets, but then her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, there's been a last-minute seating change," she said, her voice tight. Before Malcolm could ask why, a woman in a beige designer coat stepped forward from behind them. She handed over her ticket and muttered just loudly enough to be heard, "I can't sit next to them." The words hung in the air like poison. The agent avoided Malcolm's and Denise's eyes, tapped a few keys, and printed new boarding passes, seats far apart. "I'm afraid that's the best I can do," she said. Malcolm's jaw tightened, Denise's heart sank, but they didn't argue. They boarded in silence, Malcolm sitting near the front, Denise several rows behind. Passengers looked away awkwardly. Neither of them knew that in the cockpit, the pilot had just been told about the seating issue, and when he saw the names Malcolm Carter and Denise Carter on the manifest, his eyes went wide. Without a word, he unbuckled, stepped out of the cockpit, and began walking down the aisle. Malcolm sat rigidly in his seat, staring straight ahead while the white man beside him flipped casually through a business magazine, occasionally glancing at Malcolm with the kind of detached curiosity reserved for strangers one assumes they'll never see again. Meanwhile, Denise sat several rows back between a young woman with headphones and a middle-aged man who kept his laptop open, typing frantically. She felt the sting of tears but refused to let them fall. This was supposed to be their special day, and she wasn't going to let ignorance steal it from her. But as she fastened her seatbelt and tried to calm her breathing, she noticed movement at the front of the plane. A tall man in a crisp pilot's uniform stepped out of the cockpit, his cap tucked under one arm, scanning the rows with an expression that was both serious and strangely warm. He paused when his eyes met Malcolm's, and something flickered there. Recognition, deep and unmistakable. Without breaking eye contact, the pilot began walking slowly down the aisle. Passengers murmured and shifted in their seats, some craning their necks to see what was happening. The flight attendants looked tense. One of them even whispered urgently into her radio. But the pilot ignored them. He stopped first at Malcolm's row. "Sir," he said, his voice carrying just enough authority to hush the nearby chatter. "Could you please follow me for a moment?" Malcolm hesitated, but stood. The pilot then turned and continued toward Denise's seat. She looked up, startled, as he said softly, "Ma'am, I need you as well." Confused and slightly worried, Denise unbuckled her seatbelt and followed him. The pilot led them both toward the front of the plane, past curious eyes and the muttering of the woman in the beige coat who was now glaring at them as though they had stolen something from her. When they reached the first-class section, the pilot turned to the attendant stationed there and said, "These two will be sitting together right here in 1A and 1B. The attendant opened her mouth to object, but the pilot's next words made her go silent. "They're my parents." The cabin erupted into a stunned silence, broken only by the soft hum of the engines. Malcolm and Denise exchanged bewildered glances, almost laughing at the absurdity of the claim. The pilot, sensing their confusion, smiled and said quietly, "I'll explain in a moment." He helped Denise into her seat, then Malcolm, before crouching down beside them. My name is Captain Aaron Matthews, he began, and 32. Years ago, when my mother was struggling to raise me on her own, there was a young couple who lived 2 doors down. They weren't related to us, but they treated me like their own son. Fed me, gave me advice, encouraged me when things were hard. That couple was you. Denise blinked, searching his face. Slowly, recognition dawned. Little Aaron? She whispered. The captain grinned. Not so little anymore, but yes. Malcolm chuckled in disbelief. You were the boy who always wanted to fly, he said. Aaron nodded, his eyes shining. You told me once that I could be anything I wanted, no matter what the world said. You bought me my first toy airplane. I've never forgotten. As the words sank in, Denise felt her throat tighten. She reached for Aaron's hand. We didn't do anything special, she said softly. You did, Aaron replied. You gave me hope. You gave me family when I didn't have one. Passengers in first class were leaning in, listening, and even some in economy had stood up to see what was going on. The woman in the beige coat shifted uncomfortably, her earlier smugness replaced by an awkward flush. Aaron straightened and addressed the cabin in a clear, firm voice. For anyone wondering why these two are in first class now, it's because they raised a pilot. And on my plane, no one separates my family. The rest of the flight felt different, as though the air itself had changed. Malcolm and Denise sat side by side, sipping champagne and reminiscing with Aaron about the old neighborhood, the summer, block parties, the tiny basketball hoop in their driveway, the nights when they'd sit outside and watch the planes pass overhead while Aaron peppered Malcolm with questions about how they stayed in the sky. Passengers who had overheard the story smiled at them in passing, and a few even apologized quietly for not speaking up earlier when they saw what had happened at the gate. But the most unexpected moment came an hour into the flight, when the woman in the beige coat approached their seats. She stood awkwardly, her hands clasped in front of her. I'm sorry, she said, her voice low but trembling. I was wrong. Denise looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, she said simply, choosing grace over bitterness. The woman returned to her seat without another word, but her face was different, humbled. As the plane began its descent into London, Aaron returned to their side. You know, he said with a grin, I've flown hundreds of flights, but this one means more to me than any other. You two taught me what love looks like. Now it's my turn to return the favor. He hugged them both before returning to the cockpit. When the plane touched down and the seatbelt sign switched off, passengers stood to disembark, many offering Malcolm and Denise warm smiles or small nods of respect. And as they stepped off the plane into the bright London morning, Denise squeezed Malcolm's hand and whispered, Best anniversary ever. Malcolm chuckled, his voice low and proud. Told you love always wins.